All right, all right. Woosah, woosah. All right, so I know last week I told everybody to relax, calm down, take your deep breaths. So this week I just got to remind people that Prime took over a 1-11 team. All right. Let me put that out there. Prime took over a 1-11 team. That's first and foremost. And I know people probably think, oh, here come the excuses. Oh, here we go with this. But I'm just keeping it real. He took over a 1-11 team. That's first and foremost. Last year, got off to a hot start, ruffled a lot of feathers, made a lot of enemies. Let's just keep it real. Put a lot of bullseyes and targets on backs. And, they had a cold spell. And it mostly came down to the offense and the defensive line. The offense was having problems protecting Shador and, getting pushed on the run game. The defensive line was having problems, getting pressure on the quarterback. So those were the problems that was going on last year. And then you fast forward to the game that we saw last week against North Dakota State. Told everybody to calm down, relax. And then this past week against Nebraska, where it got, a little ugly. It got a little ugly. We keep it real. It got a little ugly. But that's what happens when you have rivalries. We talking about college football. College football has a lot of rivalries. NFL has rivalries too, but that's kind of generational. But in college football, it's like ongoing. It's every year. I went to Western Michigan, go Broncos, and our rivals was the Chips. Chippewas. Yeah, those guys. Those were our rivals. So that's ongoing. No matter what freshman class comes in, they're going to know about the Western Central rivalry. With Colorado, they had a lot of transfers, and that's the thing about the portal. With the portal, it changes the tradition of college football. When teams are getting most of their players from the portal, they coming from different schools. You got players coming from Ohio State, Alabama, Florida State, coming from all these different schools. They're not used to or not necessarily even used to. They don't have the animosity for the rivals that Colorado has to, have that emotion in those games. And I feel like that's the turning point or the deciding factor in a lot of these games is that emotion, And I'm not saying, all the games in the past. I'm talking about specifically from Saturday. That was an emotional game. That was a rivalry. You had quarterbacks getting called out. There was a lot going on last week. So you got to understand that when it is rivalry week and one side knows because, they're a little more traditional in their program building. So you got players coming up as freshmen, and then when they get to be juniors and seniors, they're going to still be locked in on these rivalries. Look at Nebraska quarterback, Dylan Raiola, Dominic's, former Lions son. Think about him. He's a freshman this year. Next year, he's going to be building on it. Colorado's going to be a little more accustomed to it if, the players stick around and, they don't have as many transfers in and out. And then his junior year, he'll still be building on these rivalries. And he got his dad in his ear saying that he never lost to Colorado. So that's what I'm saying in terms of these rivalries. When it's a traditional program building, when you're not hopping in the portal and getting on your players, the players are more used to the rivalry weeks and how important they are to campus. When you get players out the portal, you gotta make sure that those players are filling in missing pieces and not the entire puzzle. When you getting your whole team from the portal, you don't have to have a team that gels every year, a team that gels every spring. So just got to make sure that you getting last pieces to fit the puzzle versus getting the entire puzzle from the portal. All right, so let's talk about the game. All right, so with the game, let's talk about the good things first. Go ahead. Shador Sanders had 244 yards and a touchdown after a slow start, including a pick six early on in the game. Dallin Hayden, he had 5 carries for 32 yards, had a 6.4 yard per carry. Isaiah Gustav, 3 carries, 6 yards. Charlie Offerdahl, 4 carries, 4 yards. Travis Hunter had 10 receptions for 110 yards and 3 receptions, 59 yards for Will Shepherd. So if you think about last week, I said Colorado needs to run the ball, no matter how effective or ineffective it was. It didn't quite happen. But Dallin Hayden, he looked pretty promising. He had 6.4 yards a carry. He was really toting the ball. It was times where he looked like a big-time running back. So, it was a reason we didn't do Buff Report yesterday because the Lions game came on yesterday, and I wanted to kind of talk about the effectiveness of a run game. The Detroit Lions, we didn't really run the ball throughout the Matthew Stafford era. He had to kind of carry the team on his arm, pretty much. I can't even say on his back. He carried the team on his arm. I'm getting reminiscences of that with the Colorado squad, kind of doing the same with Shador. And it didn't work for Stafford, and, it's going to be a strain on one player, especially at the quarterback position, if they got to carry the team on their arm. I would say, like I said last week.
So we talking 40 carries a game at least. That takes some of the strain, some of the pressure off of Shador. The offense won't be so predictable in terms of always dropping back to pass or always in the air game. So I would just say mix it up a little bit, run it a little more, keep the defense on their heels. Because when you pass so much as Colorado did this game and last year, it kind of makes it a little easier for defenses to scheme against you, because you're really just coming up with different rush packages at that point instead of having to worry about shutting down the run too.
Offensive line got to get some more push. If y'all got to hit them sled drills, that's just what it is. You got to take it back to the 90s sometimes. Hop on the sled drills, practice getting that push, and we'll see what happens. Defense got to be aggressive, got to be smart, no penalties. It was over 100 yards in penalties last week. Can't have penalties like that if you want to win the game. You can't have penalties. I'm saying that, multiple times on purpose, because you can't have penalties if you want to win the game. No penalties. No, but for real though, you can't have penalties. All right, so up next, it's another rivalry game, Colorado State. So now this is a rivalry game that players on the roster are familiar with. Things got real personal last year. Travis Hunter got knocked out of the game. Shador got in the guy's face. It was real personal last year. So that game is coming back around. Like I said, that's a rivalry that players on the roster are familiar with. So, that's one that I could see possibly getting out of hand, and by that I mean tempers might flare this week. I could see tempers flaring and some people possibly getting themselves put out the game on both sides. We saw that last week. Trevor Woods, I don't really know if that was targeting. When I was coming up, they would call that a forearm tackle. His head could have been up a little, but if you look at the replay, he really led with his shoulder. His shoulder is what made the contact. They were focused on his head and his head being down, but the shoulder is what made the contact. And where I'm from, they would call that a good hit. But, that was 1990, 1996 to 2003, something like that. So, that was the good old days. Things was a little different back then. So, we'll see what it is when they take the field this Saturday. You know what time it is. Need to put some grades on this buff report. Offense didn't look too good through the air or on the ground. Gave up 6 sacks. I would say that's about a C- D+. Got to put up points. That's what offense does. Offense sells tickets. Defense wins championships. Defense, first half, the defense seems to be playing 2 halves. First half, they're, trying to find their footing. Second half, they buckle down and get things done. First half, I would say they got about a D-, F maybe. They gave up a lot of points, 28 points in the first half. And then they, did what they were supposed to do in the second half and kept them at bay. 28-10. That was the final score. Couldn't quite get it done. Defense in the second half, shutout. That's an A. But, with the score being what it was, you got to call it what it is. C-, D+. Special teams. Get Jimmy Horn Jr. off special teams. That's the grade. That's the buff report. Peace.